The U.S. national debt has surpassed $37 trillion, a number so massive it breaks our ability to comprehend it. That's roughly $111,000 for every single person living in America right now. Over the past year alone, that total has grown by more than $2 trillion. That's nearly $6 billion a day, $4 million a minute, and $70,000 per second. In fiscal year 2024 alone, the U.S. government spent nearly $900 billion just paying interest on this debt. To put that in perspective, that's more than the combined defense budgets of China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom combined. We're not even touching the principal, just keeping up with the interest payments. But here's the real question that should keep you up at night. Who exactly does the United States owe all this money to? Let's break it down. The answer falls into two main categories. One, intra-governmental holdings. This is money the government literally owes to itself. Confused? Here's how it works. When you pay Social Security taxes, that money doesn't just sit there waiting for your retirement. The government borrows it and issues treasury bonds, essentially formal IOUs or IOU promises to pay it back later. The same thing happens with Medicare, federal employee retirement funds, and military pensions. In essence, one part of the government is borrowing from another part. It's like taking money from your savings account and leaving yourself a note that says, "I'll pay this back later." Two, debt held by the public. This is the big one. This is actual debt owed to investors, both domestic and foreign. And this is where things get really interesting, because this debt is split among several key players. Private investors, including individual Americans, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and banks, hold the largest chunk at approximately $24.4 trillion as of 2025. These are people and institutions betting that America is still the safest place to park their money. But there's one player that deserves special attention: the Federal Reserve. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Fed doubled its holdings of Treasury securities. Why? To keep interest rates low and pump liquidity into the economy. As of August 2025, the Federal Reserve holds appropriately $4.2 trillion in U.S. Treasury securities. Now here's where it gets wild. The Federal Reserve is technically a separate entity, but it's also part of the U.S. monetary system. So when the Fed buys Treasury bonds, it's essentially the government borrowing from itself through a complicated financial mechanism. The profits the Fed makes from interest payments, they get returned to the Treasury. It's financial inception. Foreign holders. Now, let's talk about foreign countries, because this is where many Americans get nervous. Foreign governments and investors hold approximately $8 trillion of U.S. debt, with Japan being the biggest U.S. lender, hold about $1.1 trillion in U.S. debt, with the UK and China being our second and third biggest lenders respectively. Here's the plot twist. China has been actively reducing its holdings. They held over $1 trillion just a few years ago, but have decreased their position by more than $250 billion since 2021. This isn't necessarily about geopolitics, it's also about China needing dollars for its own economic challenges and diversifying away from U.S. assets. Other significant holders include Luxembourg, Canada, and various other nations that see U.S. Treasury bonds as a safe haven for their reserves. So why should you care about who holds American debt? First, foreign holdings give other countries some financial leverage, though less than you think. China can't just call in the debt. That's not how bonds work. They mature on fixed schedules. But if foreign countries stopped buying new debt, it would drive up interest rates, making it more expensive for the U.S. government to borrow, and by extension, more expensive for you to get a mortgage or car loan. Second, the sheer size of the debt means we're spending an increasingly massive amount just on interest. That $880 billion in interest payments in 2024, that's money that could have gone to infrastructure, education, healthcare, or tax cuts. Instead, it's going to bondholders. Here's the trillion-dollar question. Is this sustainable? Economists are divided. Some argue that as long as the US dollar remains the world's reserve currency and treasury bonds remain the safest investment globally, America can continue borrowing. The US has never defaulted on its debt, and that perfect credit history counts for a lot. Others warn that we're approaching dangerous territory. The debt held by the public is projected to reach 99% of GDP. For context, that's near World War II levels. And unlike post-World War II America, we don't have a manufacturing boom and favorable demographics to grow our way out of this. The Congressional Budget Office projects that if current trends continue, interest payments alone could consume a larger portion of the federal budget than defense spending or Medicare within the next decade. The political reality. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Neither political party has shown real willingness to tackle this problem. Cutting spending means touching Social Security, Medicare, or defense, all political third rails. Raising taxes enough to make a meaningful dent is equally unpopular, so the debt keeps growing regardless of who's in power. Both Democrats and Republicans add to the debt. Tax cuts without spending reductions add to it. Spending increases without tax hikes add to it. Emergency spending for crises, pandemics, wars, or disasters adds to it. And the interest on existing debt adds to it automatically. So, who does the U.S. owe its $37 trillion debt to? The answer is almost everyone. Foreign governments, especially Japan, American investors and institutions, the Federal Reserve, and, ironically, the government owes about $7 trillion to itself. The real question isn't just who we owe, it's what happens when this debt becomes unsustainable, when interest payments crowd out everything else, when foreign countries lose confidence in U.S. bonds, when the dollar's reserve currency status comes into question. We're essentially running the world's largest experiment in national debt. And right now, we're all along for the ride. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that cuts through the noise. Drop a comment below. Do you think America's debt is a crisis or is it manageable? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.